I wanted to kind of mention the direction that took my research was towards the technical aspect necessary to be able to play these pieces. So here, I'm gonna be more precise of the requirement of each piece. However, there are some general ideas that I wanted to share because they're gonna be applicable for all the pieces and indeed general cello performance. The first one, I got it from the book Playing Cello, Cello Technique by Gerhard Mantel. This is a German cellist, and he wrote a couple of books already. And it's basically a book about how to practice the cello. And it says something very obvious in general aspects, but important as well. Focus one thing at a time. Kind of what we have right now about avoiding being multitasking because it's not good for your brain. He basically said that in that book. And this is more about, in the cello practice, is focus on one aspect of your practice at the time. If you're working on intonation, which should be always kind of the first thing to practice. Focus on that. Don't want to do intonation while at the same time doing rhythm, while at the same time doing bow strokes, for example. This is indeed a common mistake that I see many times in my students or even myself. Another aspect, Professor Dennis Parker, one of his major statements during lessons is prepare in advance. So that works also for everything, but especially cello is a big instrument, and I think this more than, I don't know, probably a piccolo or a flute. It needs all the time kind of the physical gestures in order to be able to do big motions without stopping the metric or the musical aspect of the piece we're performing. Myself, I found like as more contact that we have from our left hand with the string, better located our left hand is going to be into the cello, because it's kind of having more data entry into our brain of where our hand is to find itself into the fingerboard. And this is for everyone who kind of plays cello in a decent way. Efficiency of motion is a priority, so always trying to prioritize. Do not move extra if you don't need. These are the basic concepts that we're going to have as a base or underneath all the specific details we're going to talk. Konzertetüden number 1. So, as I mentioned, this is kind of a known piece. Only number 4 is known. This you can see is the first line of the concert number 1. This is from the new edition. Kind of look like a piano part, to be honest. It's because it creates a lot of polyphony between the melody line and the bass, which act as a pedal. The challenges of this piece is that have to be with the motion of structural motions. And let me define what I call the structural motion. Structural motion is basically any adjustment, important adjustment of the left hand or arm about balance, shifting, thumb, or a string crossing. So for example, if I'm playing, that would be a structural motion because I am displacing my hand, right? I'm moving the whole limb in order to get from one position to the other. If I bring my thumb up, it will be another structural motion because I am changing kind of the balance point of my hand. Of course, talking about efficient, I always try to remain as close or similar as possible to my previous position. But for nature, there are a few motions that requires this adjustment of balance. Important, if I go back to the focus on one thing at a time, I realize by teaching and then apply this to myself, do a structural motion at the same time usually tends to miss. So always it's important to divide the structural motion. I'll give you an example. If I'm gonna do a shift, I shift first and then I take my thumb up. That will be for a scales of a scale. I will always try to avoid shift with my thumb at exactly the same time, because I explained it that it's just too much information for the brain to process at the same time. So I'm just trying to simplify the information I'm putting here in order to be more efficient. This piece in particular, one of the major challenge that is make it cool, is because of the polyphony it creates. I am playing on my melody line, the top line, this voice. This is what I'm playing on my top line. However, I have to also add a bass. So at the beginning, the way is there. We will say it. What makes this kind of complex is because I'm doing two structural motion. I am shifting, but at the same time doing a string crossing, which kind of the hardest part for me to practice. And this is how it should be approached, always focusing on one thing at a time. The other aspect I wanted to talk is anchor finger. I'm not sure if we're familiar with that term, probably my students are. It is just basically to have at least one finger grounding the hand with towards the fingerboard. Sometimes I see on players, students, that they want to kind of play on the air, something like that. The feeling should be always grounded on the string in both hands, indeed. But many times, because of the structural motion, our hand is just moving all around. So having at least one finger that keep kind of up takes the function of the center, grounding the hand, always allows kind of the position to be grounded on the string, and as a consequence, being in tune. An example of this, and at some point I am playing. So at the first part, I was using my third finger as my anchor, because I am just rotating around my third finger. Also, I'm using it to move my hand. Okay, there is an example. Another example, a little bit more obvious, is when I'm playing. This is in the ternary form. This is the B thing. I have to play. A mistake without having an anchor will be playing. Almost impossible to play. I am just doing too many motion, which is not efficient, but at the same time I am losing my grounded feeling with the string, in this case the second finger. So these are just a couple of the features that are necessary in order to perform this. Indeed, all of the features that I'm going to be talking about, the etudes, are applicable for every piece of music, but I am analyzing, I just pick three important concepts of each etude for this performance today. So without further talking, because I don't want you to be sleeping, this is etude number 1. I don't know if you remember from the first part where I was talking about the arpeggios and the fingerings of this. So if I exemplify this a little bit, what is a modern way of doing arpeggios? If I want to do C major arpeggio, okay, indeed we can see this in many pieces. Don Juan, which is a very famous etude for cello, something like that, a little bit more in tune. However, in this particular piece, using this kind of, I don't want to use the word old-fashioned technique, but more like this old-fashioned Russian technique. The shifts are happening basically on the same string, which helps in the color, yes, but at the same time add the challenge of doing a lot of shifting. So for example, my first line, I have to do that like 20 times during the etude, super fast. Oh. And then, that is one of the major challenges of this piece. I received the suggestion of changing the fingers many times, but for term of the challenge, I like the challenge, maybe I like the software, I don't know. And for term of also this performance, I wanted to keep it as more original as possible, just to kind of see how the real challenge of this piece back in that time were. So, I didn't talking too much. Something important, the three aspects that I wanted to mention here, a related finger, something that I learned pretty much here with Professor Dennis, is basically the last finger that I'm using in a position has to be the finger that will lead my hand to the next position. If I exemplify this on an arpeggio, this is my last finger before the next note. But I use that finger when I am practicing, not for the real performance moment, to kind of locate my hand into the next position. Okay? For example, if I play an scales with an open string, I go like that. So in that way, my hand always is in touch with the string and know where it has to be. Where is departing from and where is arriving to. This also has to be with the next point, a geographical mapping, which is basically knowing the functionality of every finger in every position. So for example, there is a point where I have to do, what's that? I have to go from here, this high E, to this passage, which is the question is how I can know or be accurate about this shifting from this high E to this E, to this position. If I apply the same concept where I am bringing my last finger to set my hand, despite this is not going to be my next note. My next note is going to be this one. But because of this, I am locating my hand when I am practicing. I'm not gonna do that in the real world. And the geographical mapping is gonna tell me, okay, every finger in this specific set is on E minor scale. And of an E minor scale. So it's knowing where each finger has to go in relationship with the others into the block. Lastly, bow distribution. This has to be about, it's physics. When I go high, the string needs more bow in order to resonate correctly. So, because I have to go from a low register to high register, if I just use my bow exactly the same, I'm gonna be kind of muted by the end, because this string needs way more bow to resonate than here. Okay, so that is one of the other aspects of these pieces, and I was talking with my professor. He kind of explained me, which is makes a lot of sense. I have to go twice as longer per octave. Es decir, I mean, if I am on the low register, I'm gonna use this. When I go to the middle register, I'm gonna use twice this, so this and this. And if I go to the high register, will be 3 times that, which will be kind of from the half to the end. This is kind of the principle of bow distribution that I need in order to play this piece. Without further talking, this is etude number 2, which have an introduction different than all that we talk. Yeah, as you can mention, as you can see, one of the hardest part of this is that the repetition, kind of confusing memory. It's just a finger. It's probably, I would encourage like students who are working on this piece to find just fingers that are more efficient about the shifting to provide some more accuracy into that. So before keep playing the etudes, I wanted to mention what probably was the inspiring aspect of that time for Bukinik to create these pieces, among others, but especially these pieces. As I mentioned in my first part, artists during the 20th century, if you want to be an artist, you have to push forward, okay? Not even talking about the after-war period, that is even more, but in general, you have to experiment, you have to expand the technique of your instrument and take it to the next level. So, if we go to Europe, where he was performing as a soloist and doing all these cultural exchange between Russian Empire and Europe, he more likely was inspired by all these people that you can see here. I mentioned the Bruchmacher, who was also professor of Hector, the German professor of Bukinik. If I go back, is Hugo Becker. Sorry, Hugo Becker in Germany, in the second entry there. So he studied with Friedrich Bruchmacher and Alfredo Piatti. If I go in order, we have the six pieces for cello by André Francis Servet, thank you. Which they were already happening, and they kind of sound like this, and you will remember this sound. This is number 2. Got the idea. Then we have Alfredo Piatti a little bit closer. Well, because Adrien Francis Servet was in Belgium and was a little bit earlier, 1852. Then we have Piatti Caprices, slightly closer in date. This is from Italy. That is Italy. Then we have first the side concert etudes by David Popper. David Popper at that time was kind of, sorry, you can see my whole computer there. Popper was kind of the peak of cello pedagogy in Europe during this time. This is a bit like him. This is pretty. Slightly closer in dates to Bukinik, we have Popper for the etudes. Castro, Dennis Parker, all the 40 proper etudes recorded in one day, which is crazy. Okay, so let me get here. So all this was happening kind of in a short period of time, 1852, 1865, then 1854, 84, and 91, 1905. At the same time, during that period, Richard Wagner and Richard Strauss were already writing a lot of music. So kind of everything was on expansion, and the cello technique needs more. So what I think, because it's not written down, is okay, Bukinik saw all this happening in Europe, and he said, okay, we cannot be behind. So let me just start writing pieces that kind of portray the Russian school, but also push for the modern cello technique. So this is why I believe he is the inspirational aspect behind these works. Now, etude number 3. This is, for me, the most fun to play. Is 85 bars of continuous 16 notes, which the challenge or the fun fact is that the melody is between the first and the last note of every 4 notes. I mean, so the melody is on the high voice, well, the middle notes, the 2 middle ones, kind of make a pedal to kind of create polyphony. This is so melody together. So it's kind of fun. So the 3 aspects I wanted to talk about this. The first one is kind of what I just did, is reducing motions. Basically, if I have to play 85 bars of the same motion for my right arm, and at the same time fast, and I want to be accurate, my motions are not going to be a waste of my energy. I will try to So I don't know if you can see that the motion of the arm is basically reduced to a gesture of my hand. This is how we get the spiccato and the speed and the clarity we need. Anticipated shift preparation, this is something that I also learned a lot in here on the Professor Parker. It's basically playing the note before or ahead of time so that you can hear the correct intonation. For example, at some points I have to play what I'm doing when I'm practicing for that passage, I always go etc. That kind of gesture allows my brain to kind of hear the note ahead of time. I'm not gonna play it like this in real time, I think it would be impossible, but that kind of gives me the sense of where exactly my hand have to go on certain period of time to always be in tune and be precise. Another example of that, the passage that I just played. No, I'm lost. Okay. In that way, my hand is never lost. I don't know if you realize that I am using the related finger that we talked on the first etude. Probably you won't remember at this point, but to always tells me where my last note was and where I have to go on my next note, but at the same time connecting that kind of intersection between places. That always keep my hand mapped, keep my hand grounded and knowing where it is. The last thing, compartmentalización. Compartment. I need to pick different another name. So grouping. So this is basically, I will say, okay, I just divide the piece in smaller chunks. But what I wanted to explain is that I'm not dividing just by beat or by melody. Sometimes I need to divide it by hand structures. For example, in the passage that I just played, that will be half of the beat. But after that, I have to shift. So when I was first approaching this passage, I was kind of having a hard time keeping it on time. Until my professor told me, well, just divide it and kind of put together what is into the same position and make a break, next position. I won't be dividing by beat, but I will be dividing by hand structure. And this is how it looks. Half beat, but so. If I go by beat, will be like this. So the beat, the shift is kind of in the middle of the beat, but for some reason, I think I just practice also too much in the other way. It just makes my hand go slower and adds kind of an extra layer of difficulty to the piece. So this is just another strategy. No? Sorry. As another layer of strategies about how to practice, especially when they're fast passage, and how you can divide it between beats, hand structure or frames, melodies, etc. I use this a lot, especially when I'm trying to teach shiftings. For example, I always wait here, finish your part and shift, and then play. So then you provide to your brain some extra time to kind of set yourself into each position. So without further talking, this will be etude number 3. last etude that I want to perform today is the one that is known, which is funny about this one is basically a combination of all the previous technical aspects that I mentioned during the other pieces. The other pieces, the other three, are kind of more similar in terms of the challenge. For example, number one, chords with the polyphony on the bass, right? For you to remember, the whole structure was like that. Number two, the arpeggios all the time. Number three, well, the shifting and the fast pass. Okay, but number four, this is the funny fact, have a little of everything, a little of fast, a lot of shiftings. Well, not a lot, a little of big shiftings, a string crossing, a radio motion. Please help me with this word again. The radius motion, radiation. Yeah, which is basically talking about reducing the motion in here when you have a lot of string crossing. So this is basically that. Maybe the only aspect I haven't talked previously is what we call the old bow, the new bow, sorry. This is when we shift at the same time left hand and right hand. We use that for more thematic expression type of purposes, and is maybe the only feature that I haven't touched from previous etudes. This happened at the beginning. So that's it. I'm kind of going at the same time. So, important fact, for example, this introduction by itself is already challenging, especially because I have to go from this position, a chord position, to an octave. How can I shift while at the same time bringing my thumb up? This is how we go to the beginning about how we divide a structural complex motion into smaller parts. Before shifting, my thumb is already up, for example. That allows me to be already in position for what is next. So, without further talking again, this is Konzertetüden number 4, F minor. so much for coming. If you have any question, because as a part of the lecture recital, this part is open to questions. So, any questions? Great. So, yes, chimes after here. Thank you everyone for coming. Really, I appreciate your time, especially because it's a Thursday, 5:30 p.m. But thank you so much. This is important.
That was good.
Claro, Flores, muy bien. Mire, Rosa, un aplauso.